The idea of the original position. Now, this is something that you have already read if you were a humanities student, an arts student in class 10th and 11th, in class 11th and 12th. So you must have already read about the idea of original position and how John Rawls talks about the veil of ignorance. So we have discussed three fundamental ideas. So now the society is a fair system of cooperation, idea of a well-ordered society, and the idea of the basic structure of society. Now we discuss another fundamental ideas. One is of the original position, another is the idea of citizens and free and equal persons. So in total we have 10, 10 or 6 fundamental ideas. So we're going to discuss all of that. Yeah, so we have 6. The 6th one is the idea of public justification. Let us begin with how we might be led to the original position and the reasons for using it. The following line of thought might lead us to it. We start with organizing idea of society as a fair system of cooperation between free and equal persons. Now we have to see how all these fundamental ideas are connecting to each other. So they are distinct fundamental ideas, but all of them connect to each other. Okay, like the first one that we read, the idea of a society as a fair system of cooperation, then the idea of a well-ordered society, and then the idea of a basic structure of society. Okay, now you see that when we start with organizing the idea of society as a fair system of cooperation between free and equal persons. Now immediately the question arises, how do we specify these fair terms? How can the society be made a place wherein everybody is cooperating and on the terms that everybody is cooperating, they are fair? It's not that somebody is adjusting more, giving up more, sacrificing more, and getting less. Okay. For example, are they specified by an authority distinct from the person cooperating, say by God's law? So the specifications or the terms of cooperation that we need to inculcate, are they to be what? They to be supposed by a God's law, or who's going to make them? Are these terms recognized by everyone as fair by reference to a moral order of values? So we see that these terms are ultimate terms, but because they are maybe a part of the God's law, or maybe they are because of their moral value. What is the reason for that? Say by rational intuition, or by reference to what someone has viewed as a natural law, or are they settled by an agreement reached by fate? So how do we look at those specifications and those terms? Are they to be considered as God's law or natural law, or something which we have all agreed upon after discussion? So fairness adopts a form of the last answer. The fair terms of social cooperation are to be given by an agreement. So when Rawls talks about the fair system of cooperation, it's not something that is a natural law that we just have to accept because it may have been made by God or something, nature's law, but because everybody has agreed to it. All those who are a part of that cooperation and a part of that society have agreed to those terms for a fair system of cooperation, and that is why those terms have to be accepted, not just because they are God's law or they have to be accepted as it is. There's a reason, and the reason is that the majority have agreed to it. One reason is that given the assumption of reasonable pluralism, we've already talked about that how not everyone can have the same line of thought, not everyone will have the same goals. Everybody will have different goals. Development for one person does not necessarily mean development for other person. So citizens cannot agree on any moral authority, say a sacred text or a religious institution or tradition. So in this reasonable pluralism, we've already talked about how democracy gives space to this reasonable pluralism. And this reasonable pluralism is only because people have different faiths. People believe in different things. For them, different things have different meanings. Okay. If you talk about the concept of God itself, God for one person is very different. God for one person is, blue colored, with long hair, with a snake around the neck, with the wearing a tiger or a cheetah skin, and wearing different kinds of jewelry. that is God for one person, and for another person just standing right beside the person, God is one who's they see it as a form of God who's nailed on the cross, bleeding, wearing kind of rags or that kind of stuff. So, if we talk about a fundamental thing like God, which is mostly we can say universal, which is believed in by a lot of people, even for God there are different ideas and different manifestations of them, different forms of it. So of course there cannot be any single thing. Even if we talk about, say, the terms of cooperation have to be accepted because they are morally right. So morality again differs for different people. This is something we've already read in cultural relativism, I think last semester or before that. So we've already read about cultural relativism, how different morality is different for different people. Okay, nor they can agree about a moral order of values or the dictates of what some view as natural law. So, what better alternative is there than an agreement between all citizens? So, of course, here he is defining why an agreement. First of all, he's saying that the terms of cooperation have to be reached by agreement. We're following it because majority of people agree to it. And secondly, why we have chosen this path over, say, nature's law or God's law, and the reason we have discussed above already. Now, this agreement, like any other, must be entered into under certain conditions for it to be valid. In particular, these conditions must situate free and equal persons fairly and must not permit them to have unfair bargaining advantages. So you see how we are going deep and deep and deep. We're first talking about a big idea, a bigger fundamental idea. We're talking about the idea of society as a fair system of cooperation, society with a fair, terms of cooperation. Okay, fair system with terms of cooperation, and then we're going behind it about how to reach to that idea. So first upon the terms or the specifications that we have decided on have to be agreed by all people. Now when we talk about that they have to be reached by agreement, how is the agreement supposed to be? That is another point of discussion. So here John Rawls, and basically this idea of original position, talks about that how or what is the way through which we have to reach to those fair terms of cooperation, and they are different. Of course they will be different. So what is that way to reach that fair system of cooperation? How has the agreement to happen? Suppose you say that there is a group of people, say 10 people, wherein 5 are very wealthy, they are very powerful, and everybody is agreeing to it, but the other persons are not really getting a chance to put in their, thoughts and views and opinions. So, of course, some people are over an advantage over the other people. So, in that case, we are following and we are accepting the fair terms of cooperation by agreement of all people, but then agreement itself has not been fair. Okay. Further, threats of force and coercion, deception, and fraud and so on must be ruled out. So there should be no signs of force, no coercion, wherein we are just forcing some people, let's say if they're poor or weak, so the powerful are just dominating over them, and then they're saying that this is something that everybody has agreed to. Sometimes but agreements in everyday life are made in determinate situation within the background and institutions of the basic structure, and the particular features of these situations affect the terms of agreements reached. Clearly, unless those situations satisfy the conditions for valid and fair agreements, the terms agreed to will not be regarded as fair. Just as Fairness hopes to extend the idea of a fair agreement to the basic structure itself, here we face a serious difficulty for any political conception of justice that uses the idea of contract, whether or not the contract is social. The difficulty is this: we must specify a point of view from which a fair agreement between free and equal persons can be reached, but this point of view must be removed from and not distorted by the particular features and circumstances of the existing basic structure. The original position with the feature I have called the veil of ignorance specifies this point of view. Now, the agreement through which we are reaching to those fair terms of cooperation, the way to that agreement should also be free and fair and equally reachable to all people, and it should not have been dominated by only a certain section of people. And for that, this idea of a social contract, what is the social contract? The social contract is basically everybody coming together to agree that yes, we are forming these fair terms of cooperation, we are accepting it because everybody is agreeing to it. So this is a kind of a social contract where all people are mutually respecting each other's choice. Also, they're taking care of that with me, there's this other person also that needs to be treated equally and well in the society, and that is why all of us coming together are following this path to reach a fair system of cooperation. Now, for that reason, for this thing, John Rawls introduces the original position, and for the original position, he talks about the veil of ignorance. Now, before we go any further, let me just give you a summed up thing of what both of these things mean. These two are not synonymous. Original position is a different thing, and veil of ignorance is a different thing. So in original position is basically the position or the stance from wherein one is making any laws, one is making any rules. And being in that original position is arrived only when the person is in a veil of ignorance. So that original position is basically a position wherein a person is making laws, and that position is original because that person is in a veil of ignorance during the making of those laws. So in the original position, the parties are not allowed to know the social positions of the particular comprehensive doctrines of the persons they represent. They also do not know a person's race, ethnic group, sex, various native endowments such as strength, intelligence, all within the normal range. So being in an original position, the person who is making laws does not know the other person's sex, ethnicity, how much wealth the other person has, how intelligent the other person is. Basically, no social, equations of the person that the law is being made for. We express these limits on information figuratively by saying the parties are behind a veil of ignorance. So we say this because we say that the person is in original position and the person does not know any social details about the other person, because that person who's making the law is behind a veil of ignorance. So one reason why the original position must abstract from the contingencies, the particular features and circumstances of persons within the basic structures are the conditions of a fair agreement between free and equal persons on the first principles of justice for the structure, must eliminate the bargaining advantages that inevitably arise over time within any society as a result of cumulative social and historical tendencies. To persons according to their threat advantage is not the basis of political justice. Contingent historical advantages and accidental influences from the past should not affect an agreement on principles that are to regulate the basic structure from the present into the future. So the only reason why John Rawls refers and suggests this original position and veil of ignorance is because over time, during the course of history, every person builds certain prejudices against certain people, and this is a normal thing, and this happens with everybody. All of us presume certain things about a particular sex or a particular group of people, a religion, an ethnic group, or so let's say people of a certain nation. We all have prejudices and presumptions for a certain group of people, certain kind of people. All of us do that, and it's a very natural thing, and one can say it's beyond the control of the human mind and body. Okay, and that is why the reason is that when one is making laws, the person doesn't know who he is making the law for, who is the person on the other side of the veil, on whom the laws will be getting affected. And that is how, when you don't know whether the other person on the other side of the veil is the person you like or not, belongs to what group, what ethnicity, what religion, so of course you'll make a law which will be very much unjust, which will not target a particular group, or which will not be beneficial to one particular group, because you don't know whether the person actually belongs to that group or not. The idea of the original position is proposed then as the answer to the question of how to extend the idea of a fair agreement. That position is set up as a situation that is fair to the parties, is free and equal, and is properly informed and rational. Thus, any agreement made by the parties as citizens' representatives is fair. So, of course, as we're talking, we're going behind. We are retracing our steps in a way that to reach the fair system of cooperation, we're adopting the way of agreement by all the people. And the way that everybody is agreeing should also be free and fair. It should not be that some people are dominating and then making others agree over those terms of cooperation. And for that, or the way to get that to get that fair agreement, we are referring to the original position or to the veil of ignorance. Thus, agreement made by the parties as citizens' representatives is fair, since the content of the agreement concerns the principles of justice for the basic structure. The agreement in the original position specifies the fair terms of social cooperation between citizens regarded as such persons, hence the name justice is fairness. Observe that, as stated in theory, the original position generalizes the familiar idea of the social contract. It does so by making the object of agreement the first principles of justice for the basic structure rather than a particular form of government, as in Law K. The original position is also more abstract. The agreement must be regarded as both hypothetical and non-historical. Now, if we talk about two such characteristics or features of the original position, first is it is hypothetical, and second is it is non-historical. Now, it is hypothetical because we ask the party could or would or agree to not what they have agreed to, and second is non-historical. We do not suppose the agreement has ever or indeed ever could actually be entered into, and even if it could, that would make no difference. So basically these two features are connected to each other because they are hypothetical. Okay, that is something that they have not already done. That is something they could or they would do. What would they do if they are in this position? So that if statement comes in, and that is why it is a hypothetical position. And secondly, it is non-historical because it has never happened before. Okay, and also it could never actually be done that way. Okay, so this is a very hypothetical position and a very non-historical position because it cannot actually be entered into. It's a very, very abstract idea. And when one makes laws from the point of view of the original position and the veil of ignorance, that is when we're expecting it to be very fair and free from all the prejudices. The second point means that what principles the parties would agree is to be decided by analysis. We characterize the original position by various stipulations, each with its own reasoned backing, so that the agreement that would be reached can be worked out deductively by reasoning from how the parties are situated and described, the alternatives open to them, and from what the parties count as reasons and this information available to them. Here, there may seem to be a serious objection. Since hypothetical agreements are not binding at all, the agreement of the parties in the original position would appear to be of no significance. In reply, the significance of the original position lies in the fact that it is a device of representation or a thought experiment for the purpose of public and self-clarification. We are to think of it as modeling two things. First, it models what we regard here and now as fair conditions under which the representatives of citizens viewed solely as free and equal persons are to agree to the fair terms of cooperation, whereby the basic structure is to be regulated. Second, it models what we regard as acceptable restrictions on the reasons on the basis of which the party situated in fair conditions may properly put forward certain principles of political justice and reject others. So what Rawls is doing is, he himself is proposing the idea of the original position and the veil of ignorance, and what he is also trying to incorporate is any objection that the idea may give rise to. So there is one serious objection or a rejection of the idea that because this whole idea is hypothetical, that means it is not really true. It is something that we are imagining or thinking. So then how can we say that it is binding or not? Because it is a hypothetical idea. So how are people going to agree on it? So the agreement of the parties would appear to be of no significance, because this is a very hypothetical thing. The original position is an abstract position. It is not actually real. It's not actually that you're, sitting in a box with, which is totally covered from, four sides, and in one side there's a long veil, and therein you have to sit and make. It's not something that. It's a very abstract thing. It's something that is done over mentally. It is mentally present, and that is why this is something very, very abstract and not a physical thing. So how can we say that it is binding on all, since it is abstract? To this, what Rawls replies is that the original position is not actually any position, it's just a device of representation. It's a method that he has proposed that can be used to make laws. It's a model for representation of all the people. Okay. It is a thought experiment for the whole public and for self clarification, that if there is what we are not what we need to keep in mind here is the word if that lies in this original position, that today if you were asked to make a law for somebody that you know nothing about, just you know that it is a human, you don't even know if it is a male or a female, what is the sex, not only male or female, can be any other sex also, so you don't even know the sex of the person, you don't know the gender of that person, you know nothing about that person, and then you're asked to make a law for a certain thing. What would be your stance? How would you go about making that law? That is what the original position talks about. So it models two things. First is it models the fair conditions so that the representation is fair. What are the conditions that need to be adopted so that when one is making any laws or any rules, those laws and rules are fair and representative to all. And second, how as acceptable restrictions on the reasons on the basis of which the party situated in the free conditions may properly put forward certain political justice principles and then reject others. So how come we have to reject some things and we have to accept for the purpose of achieving political justice? Thus, if the original position suitably models our convictions about these two things, namely fair conditions of agreement as free and equal and appropriate restrictions on reasons, we conjecture that the principles of justice the parties would agree to, could we properly work them out, would specify the terms of cooperation that we regard here and now as fair and supported by the best reasons. This is because, in that case, the original position would have succeeded in modeling in a suitable manner what we think on due reflection are the reasonable considerations to ground the principles of a political conception of justice. To illustrate regarding fair conditions, what you need to take care of here is it seems a lot confusing what Rawls is talking about, but basically every time that he introduces one thing, these these subpoints that we see, the 6.4, 6.5, all of these are connecting to the main idea. He is just referring to different legs of the main idea itself. So there's one fundamental idea that you need to keep in mind, and how and what are the different points that should be considered to achieve that fundamental idea, and that fundamental idea, the way or the path to achieve that fundamental idea should also be free, fair, equal, all inclusive, all representative. The parties are symmetrically situated in the original position. These models are considered convictions that in matters of basic political justice, citizens are equal in all relevant respects. That is, they possess to a sufficient degree the requisite powers of moral personality and the other capacities that enable them to be normal and fully cooperating members of society over a complete life. Thus, in accordance with the precept of formal equality, that those equal in all relevant respects are to be treated equally, citizens' representatives are to be situated symmetrically in the original position. Otherwise, we would not think that position fair to citizens as free and equal. So, all the citizens who are placed in that original position, who are asked to make representative rules for everybody, possess that moral prowess with them that will enable them to make representative laws for everyone. That is something that needs to be very clear, and that is something that we are presupposing. That's our presumption, that whoever is placed within that veil of ignorance and within that original position already possesses the moral responsibility that one needs to make laws which will be suitable and representative to all people. To illustrate regarding appropriate restrictions and reasons, if we are reasonable, it is one of our considered convictions that the fact that we occupy a particular social position, say, is not a good reason for us to accept or to expect others to accept a conception of justice that favors those in that position. If you're wealthy, poor, we do not expect everyone else to accept a basic structure favoring the wealthy or the poor simply for that reason. To model this and other similar convictions, we do not let the parties know the social positions of the person they represent. The same idea is extended to other features of persons by the veil of ignorance. Now again, it's talking about the very same and simple thing. If one person is wealthy, if we know that the person that we are making laws for is wealthy, and if we make it according to the wealth of that person, that means the other person who is poor will not get a fair representation. And it is true to all other social tendencies. It may refer to the tendency of, being a particular gender or being a particular ethnic group or a religious group or any other such thing, for example. And that is why the social tendency of the person is not revealed. Because, okay, maybe one person is poor or wealthy, but if we make laws or representations according to that social position of that one person, the others who are not in that social position will definitely feel neglected. And that is why the social position or the social tendencies of the person is hidden from the parties in the original position. So, in short, the original position is to be understood as a device of representation. As such, it models are considered convictions as reasonable persons by describing the parties as fairly situated and as reaching an agreement subject to appropriate restrictions and reasons for favoring principles of political justice. Now, the idea of free and equal persons. To this point, we have simply used the idea of free and equal persons. We must now explain its meanings and role. Justice Fairness regards citizens as engaged in social cooperation and hence as fully capable of doing so, and this over a complete life. Persons so regarded have what we may call the two moral powers explained as follows.